All right, we are starting to record. I'm going to record the warm-up as well. Shh. All right, Frankie, I'm going to have you just explain to me what to do, so I'm not going to have you guys come up, partly because I just stuck my pen in my mouth, and that's kind of extra. So I'll just do the writing so you don't have to touch my pen. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so we're starting where? 0, and doing what?
Going back forward.
What does back mean?
Left.
Left. Okay, so we're going left 4 units. So Jake and anyone else who may not have been here, I think everyone else was here. This -4 means that we go 4 units to the left. Okay, now what, Frankie?
And then go 1 more unit to the left.
Good. What do we end up at?
-5.
Good. So our answer is -5. So we had 2 negatives, so we went left and left again. Number 2, Haley, where do we start? 0. What do we do first? Left 4. Good. And then what? Right 2. And where do we end up? Good. So our answer is -2. Number 3, Jordan, tell us what to do.
You start at 0 and you go right 8,
Uh-huh.
and you go left 6,
Good. And where do we end up?
2.
Good. Okay, last one, Carlton, tell us what to do. Where do we start?
0.
Uh-huh.
You go left 1 and then left 5.
Good. And where do we end up?
40.
Good. Okay, any questions about what we're doing? Jake, did that make sense to you just from the warm-up? Negative, we go that many units left. Positive, we go that many units right. Yeah. No, that was a really good question, Carissa, because some people did this. Only circle the number where you end up. So don't circle all of your numbers, just circle your answer. I want you to circle them. Okay, now we're going to go in. Oh, actually, let's go over homework, and then we'll go into today's lesson. Okay, so homework, I'm going to work off yours because I don't have my copy in front of me. For number 1, you should have -3. Number 2, -4. Number 3 is 1. Number 4 is -10. Number 5 is -4. Number 6 is -4. Number 7 is -7. Number 8 is -7. Number 9 is -2. And number 10 is -9.
I'm on it.
Okay, any questions, any problems that you want to see? Your problem is if you had 2 negatives in a row, you need to go both in the same direction, both left. Anyone who, if you got problems wrong, that you need to know why? Any questions? Okay. Great, let's go on to today's lesson. Okay, first thing up, when I copied this, there was an error. Yours says lesson 2. This is not lesson 2. We did lesson 2 on Friday. So please cross off that whole row where it says lesson 2 and the title of the lesson and change it so that it says lesson 3, rules for adding integers. Okay, I did not want to recopy the whole thing and waste all that paper, so I'm going to have you change that on your paper. So you're going to cross off here where it says lesson 2 and change that. The title of the lesson is wrong also, so don't just cross off the word 2 and put a 3. Make sure you also change the title of the lesson, which is rules for adding integers. And the objective of this lesson is adding integers efficiently. So on Friday, we worked on adding integers using the number line. So we had to count every time we did this on the number line to figure out what our answer was. Today, we're going to be doing some numbers that maybe don't fit on our number line, that are bigger numbers. So we need a system for adding those numbers. So that's the goal for today. Okay, the first slide, this is not on your notes. I just want you to think about this a little bit, because a lot of times, we get asked questions that are in really abstract terms like this, where it's asking us things about letters. So the title of this is Finding the Sum of P plus Q. So if P were some number, I'm going to say that P is a positive number. So I'm just going to put a 0 on my number line. So you guys don't have to write anything. It's not on your notes. So P, I'm going to say is positive. So I'm just going to put a point somewhere here, and I'm going to say that point is P. Now, if I were to find the sum of P plus Q, I want you to think about these different scenarios. First of all, what if Q was positive? Where would the sum of P plus Q be on the number line? Sarah? Okay, so it would be where? Like, could it be here? No? Like maybe here? Okay, so it has to be somewhere. We don't know how big Q is. We just know that Q is positive. Q could be this long. Q could be as long as that arrow, and then this would be P plus Q. It might be there. It might also be really big. Q could be a really big number, and if it was, P plus Q would be way over here. Because when we add a positive number to a positive number, it's going to be more positive than either of the first two numbers, right? So if Q is positive, we're always going to get a positive answer for P plus Q. Let's look at this scenario. Let's put P in the same place. What if Q is negative? Kendon?
Why does it say 1?
Just because it's a gray background. It's just a different color background. Okay, so if P were here, and if Q were negative, where would the sum P plus Q be? Natalie?
The left.
To the left of P. So could it be here?
Yeah.
Yeah, P plus Q might be here if it was negative. If it were here, P plus Q would be a positive number, right? Mark?
Is this just a paper that you took a picture of?
No. Okay, so what if Q was bigger than P? If Q was bigger than P, if the arrow was longer, if it had a longer absolute value, where would the sum of P plus Q be? Jordan? To the left of the zero. So if Q had a larger absolute value than P, then Q would be longer than P, right? So it would go past the zero. So it's possible that P plus Q could be negative. So when Q was positive and P was positive, P plus Q had to be positive. But when P was positive and Q was negative, the sum could be positive or negative depending on where it ended up. Okay, let's take a look at this same scenario. Let me use, maybe if I use a different color, it'll be easier for you to see. Is white better?
No.
Okay,
No.
let's say that P is negative. So let's put P over here now. So if Q is positive, is P plus Q going to be positive or negative, or could it be either?
Either.
Richard?
It could be either.
It could be either, yeah. So if Q were not as long as P, right, if the absolute value were not as long, if Q was this long, P plus Q might be here. But if the arrow was, for Q was this long, then P plus Q might be over here. So when P is negative and we add a positive Q, the sign could be positive or negative. Okay, now let's look at the same scenario if Q is negative. So we know that P is over here. We're saying P is negative. What if Q is negative? Will the answer be positive or negative? Miranda?
Negative.
It has to be negative, yeah, because if we're adding a negative Q, we're going to go more to the left, so P plus Q is going to have to be negative. If we're starting left and going more left, there's no way we're going to end up in positive land. We're going to stay in negative land that whole time. Okay, this slide was just to get you guys thinking about this. Now I'm going to present it in more easier terms to understand, I think. So first, we're going to use the number line to find the answers to these problems. These problems are all kind of the same. What's the same about all these problems? Sophie? Yeah, they all have 3s and 5s. So they all have the same absolute values of 3 and 5. So if we do 3 plus 5 on the number line, Carlton, what's 3 plus 5? You probably don't need the number line for this. 8. 3 plus 5 is 8. So let's put 8. How about negative 3 plus negative 5? You can use the number line if you need to. Jake, what would that be? If we went 3 to the left and then 5 more to the left, where would we end up? Negative 8. Good. So negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. So that's kind of interesting. 3 plus 5 was 8. Negative 3 plus negative 5 was negative 8. Okay. Sydney, what if we have 3 plus -5? What would that be? If you go 3 to the right and then 5 to the left, where do you end up? -2, good. So 3 plus -5 is -2. Sophie, how about -3 plus 5? Where do you end up if you go 3 to the left and then 5 to the right? +2. So let's see if we can come up with some rules based on what we saw up here. So, and this kind of has to do with what we looked at in the beginning too. When both numbers are positive, this is easy. If both numbers are positive and we want to find the answer, Richie, what do we do to the numbers? What did we do up here? Did we need the number line to do 3 plus 5?
No.
What did we do? We just added them together. Yeah. So when both numbers are positive, we just add the numbers. It's not like the rules have changed since we learned how to do this in first grade. If you have 2 positive numbers, you still just add them together. Now, when both numbers are negative, Tim, what do we do? Well, add backwards is kind of a good way to do it, right? We're still adding the numbers, but since they're both negative, our answer is negative.
We minus them.
So when both numbers are negative, we're going to add the absolute values of the number because the length of the arrow is 3 and 5, they're just going to the left. So we're adding together a number that went 3 units, whoops, that didn't go far enough. We're adding together an arrow that went 3 units to the left and an arrow that went 5 units to the left. This arrow is 3 units long, that's its absolute value. This is 5 units long, that's its absolute value. 3 plus 5 is 8, but we went left, so it's -8. So we add the numbers, but we make the answer negative. And when I say here, add the numbers, I'm talking about the absolute value of the numbers. So we're adding the value of the numbers, not the numbers with the signs. Okay, when the signs are different, what do we do? So when we had 3 and 5 and 3 and 5, what do we do to the numbers to get 2? Forget about the signs. If we have a 3 and a 5, what do we do to those numbers to get to 2? Or a 5 and a 3, what do we do to those numbers to get to 2? Natalie? We subtract the numbers. So when the numbers have different signs, we subtract the numbers. So in the first case, let me erase some of what I have up here. In the first case, we had a +3, so we had an arrow that was 3 units long going to the right, and then we had an arrow that was 5 units long going to the left. Well, what we have here is a model for subtraction. Because we have a longer arrow, we have to subtract the shorter arrow to find out the difference between the 2 arrows. Because this second arrow on top traveled all the distance of the first one plus another 2, and we have to figure out what the difference is. So that's why we subtract. We keep the sign of the number with the largest arrow or the largest absolute value. So the word that you want in here is absolute value. So in our first example, since -5 has a larger absolute value than 3, that means our left arrow is going to be longer than our right arrow, so we're going to end up with a number that's negative. If our positive arrow is longer than our negative arrow, we're going to end up with an answer that's positive. Does that make sense? If we have 2 arrows, positive and negative, whichever arrow is longer is where our answer is going to end up. Yes?
I just realized, did you and Ms. Mills send a mental note this morning? Because you're both wearing snapshots.
We're both wearing what?
Snapshots.
No, they're flannel shirts. We're supposed to wear flannel today. That's what
Yeah.
we're supposed to wear. It's spirit. Okay, now, we can simplify these rules into a poem or a song. I'm going to read it first and explain each line of it. Same signs, add and keep. So if the signs of the number are the same, for example, for this one, they're both positive. This one, they're both negative. we're gonna add the absolute values of the number and keep the sign. So for 5 plus 9, what's 5 plus 9?
14.
14. What's negative 5 plus negative 9?
Negative 14.
Negative 14. We're adding the absolute values of the signs, but we're keeping the negative sign because both of our arrows went to the left. Okay, the next one says different signs, subtract. So for both of these problems, we're going to subtract the absolute values. We're going to do 9 minus 5. You're always going to start with the larger one. Take the sign of the larger number, and then you'll be exact. So both of these have a 4 in the answer. Which one of these is going to have the negative 4? Jordan?
5 plus. Oh, the one on the left.
Yeah, the one on the left is going to have the negative 4 because the negative arrow is longer on this one. And the absolute value of negative 9 is bigger than 5. That means it has a longer arrow, and we're going to end up in negative land. Carlton?
Do you think that we might have soup today?
No, not today. We don't do cahoots usually on Tuesdays. Okay, I'm going to teach you the song now because this will stick in your head then. Here's how it goes. I'll sing it once to you, and then it will be your
That
turn.
you sang songs like each and every day.
Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number and then you'll be exact. Okay, now, when I do the boom boom part, you guys get to clap, clap. Okay, try it again. You don't have to sing this time, you just have to clap. Ready? Same signs add and keep. That was your clap, clap part. Same signs add and keep. Different signs subtract. Take the sign of the larger number and then you'll be exact.
You're still recording.
Now, I know I'm still recording now. Now you guys get to sing with me. 1, 2, ready, go. Same signs add and keep. Different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number and then you'll be exact. All right, now. Okay. Now let's go over C. Frankie, you get to do C. What did you get?
We have 0.
That is correct. Good. The signs are different. 22 is positive. This one is negative, so we subtract. 22 minus 22 is just 0. There's no keeping the sign of the larger number because neither one is larger than the other. The arrows are the same length, and that's what gets us back to 0. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, your exit ticket is this. So 6 problems to do by yourself. When you are finished, raise your hand and I will come. Wow, some of you are there. I will come and check your exit ticket. If you're good, I'll give you the homework to get started on.